Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of This Week in Hearing. I'm your host, Brian Taylor, and this week we're going to be discussing otoprotective agents and other applications of drugs used to treat hearing loss. And with me to discuss this topic is Jian Zuo, co-founder and CEO of Ting Therapeutics. I understand that we can call you Jay-Z, is that right?
Yes, I can guarantee you I have nothing to do with Beyonce's children.
Well, that's good to know. Thanks, and welcome to the broadcast, Jay-Z. We're glad to have you here.
Thank you.
I wanted to kind of dive in and start the conversation by having you maybe elaborate a little bit on the origins of Ting Therapeutics, what your founding vision is, and sort of what the mission of the company might be.
Yeah, thank you for this opportunity. I'm very happy to tell you a little bit about our company. So I have been long interested in hearing loss therapeutics as a key opinion leader in this space. I have been trying to make some realistic contribution to the people in society. So after some 25 years of studies of hearing loss mechanisms and so on, I feel I strongly need to, make some therapeutics feasible. So about 15 years ago, we started doing some hair cell regeneration studies. And after like some long studies, I feel it's very difficult to achieve this ambitious goal to restore hearing after damage in the mammalian cochlea. Actually, I still do not understand the mechanisms. So instead, I believe that the lowest hanging fruit in the inner ear therapeutic space are the acquired induced hearing loss therapeutics, which I believe are actually very feasible to tackle. Uh, from that angle, about 10 years ago, we started to character screening and characterizing some of the drugs that would prevent and treat the cisplatin-induced hearing loss, noise-induced hearing loss, as well as aminoglycoside-induced hearing loss. So we hope that this kind of approach will be very effective. Simply, I think it's because of there is really no FDA-approved drugs for this large unmet medical needs, except that recently there's a sodium thiosulfate as the first drug that has been approved for treatment of pediatric solid tumors with local non-metastatic, tumors. So I think it's feasible and it's important. So our goal is to identify drugs that have greater potency and efficacy, that have safer profiles, and can be utilized in the various means, easy, convenient delivery stories, as well as it's treated can be used to treat diverse range of tumors, not just pediatric, but also adult tumors, and so on. And also can be applied to healthy individual populations with noise-induced hearing loss, as even in an age-related hearing loss, there are bigger markets like that. So those are our goals. Our first step is actually to screen drugs with in vitro methods or with in silico methods, and plus the in vivo platforms. After screening of a large number of drugs that are out there, we've identified a large number of about 150 or so different drugs that have very potent, efficacy in terms of protecting against various insults. So we actually identify some of the top drugs that have shown more than 100 times or even 1,000 times higher potency under identical conditions, in this case, cochlear explant, than many of the existing benchmark compounds. this really raised the feasibility, or our hope that we could further develop them into, effective therapeutics. So in the last 5 years or so, we have been working on characterizing some of those good top compounds. And in this recent publications, and the grants award so on, we have been able to demonstrate those drugs actually worked in preclinical models in both zebrafish and mouse models with various induced hearing loss conditions. So we believe that this really provides preclinical models, preclinical proof of concept for the future clinical studies. So this is our hope. And this is really the history and our strategy, our vision. And in 2018, we first established this company called Ting Therapeutics, which Ting stands for hearing in Chinese. That's why we believe that this is a good sort of a Ting therapeutic for inner ear therapeutic space. So we, since then, we have characterized a large number of those drugs in preclinical models. We have applied for patents, and also we have obtained SBIR grants as well as a DoD grants. So this really laid the foundation for our company. And we recently, actually, a year ago, moved our company to San Diego. Of course, San Diego is a hub of a biotech industry with a great potential and a good environment for that. So we're very happy about this. This is pretty much the sort of a simple history of our company.
Well, thank you for that. I appreciate it. You mentioned some grants and some studies, phase 2 grants. Maybe we could talk about some of those individually. The first one I'd like to ask you about is the phase 2 NIH grant that you received, and maybe talk a little bit about any subsequent study on this, but a drug aimed at preventing antibiotic-induced hearing loss. Can you tell us a little bit about the significance of that project?
Thank you. Yeah, so this has been a long journey. For the last 5 years or so, have been conducting a large amount of in silico and in vivo screens for aminoglycoside-induced hearing loss otoprotectives. So we actually first utilized the zebrafish screens to identify the TT003 or pipe-lactin. This was the drug we discovered in the zebrafish screen, and then we later characterized them in the mouse models. And these results provide, as I said, the proof of concept for our future clinical studies, or in particular in this SBIR phase 2 grant, we aim to accomplish the subsequent studies for this TT003 for IND enabling study. IND enabling is a step that is required before we go on to the clinical trials. So we must get IND FDA approval before we can conduct clinical trials. So this is the sort of a necessary step. And in this particular grant, we propose to do trying to conduct some experiments to prove that our drugs has a very good efficacy at the different doses in multiple species, including mice and guinea pigs. And furthermore, we would like to determine that the pharmacokinetic properties are perfect for clinical trials in those preclinical models. And finally, we want to prove that it's actually does not interfere with the antibiotic bacterial killing ability in vivo. So those are all important, necessary questions for IND approval. Therefore, I think we propose to do that. And this, we are very fortunate that the NIH reviewing panels are very enthusiastic about our results and very supportive about this. The most important, I think, the study is that we were the first group to actually identify the in vivo mouse models where the drug can be used to treat the amygdaloxide-induced hearing loss in vivo in mice. This has been traditionally a very difficult task to accomplish. So I think this is why our studies are significant. And building on this grant support, we would be able to not only get those IND-enabling results, but also we would be able to, further commercialize and discuss and prepare for the clinical trials with physicians who are very keen about treating patients such as cisplatin or such as cystic fibrosis patients who have been treated with antibiotics for their lung infections and so on. Those are life-saving medications. And unfortunately, they have, many of them will develop amygdaloxide-induced hearing loss with permanent hearing loss. So this is a significant problem among many of those patients who receive the amygdaloxide treatment.
So what you just mentioned was the drug TT003, correct?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. And I believe I read somewhere that there's two other drugs, TT001 and TT002, which are used for, I believe, noise-induced hearing loss.
Yes.
Could you tell us a little bit more about those projects?
Yeah, so actually they're both effective in treating the noise-induced hearing loss as well as cisplatin-induced hearing loss. So those are also top drugs that we identified during our screens, and we further chose those top drugs to characterize them in vivo, in zebrafish, as well as in mice. So those are the proof of concept experiments and the results that are promising. And that also led us to get two additional SBIR phase 2 grants. And recently we published a paper in Science Advances that also addresses the EGFR inhibitors that are effective in protecting against noise-induced hearing loss. So these two EGFR inhibitors, one is afatinib, another one is zorevutinib, are very effective anti-cancer drugs against EGFR mutation-mediated lung cancers and other cancers. Those cancer patients do develop cisplatin-induced hearing loss, many of them. And in fact, there are about 500,000 cancer patients in the United States each year that receive chemotherapy. And more than half of them develop cisplatin or other chemotherapy-induced hearing loss. So it's a huge market. Most important is that these individuals must receive the chemotherapy, cisplatin chemotherapy. Therefore, they must have to endure those kinds of a treatment and with the risk of developing hearing loss, permanent hearing loss. So these are, on one hand, is a very unfortunate but an unmet medical need. On the other, provides a significant opportunity for us to develop the drugs against this condition, against cisplatin-induced hearing loss. Those are the individuals we can actually treat them and test our drugs and provide them with the time window and the necessity for testing our drugs to be effective or not in the clinical trials. So those are quite important for inner ear therapeutics field, because those are necessary conditions that you can actually test your drugs on. Unlike many other conditions that are basically, for example, noise-induced hearing loss, it's very complex, but also very difficult to test, because in most cases, in most professions, noise-induced hearing loss actually is, is if untreated, is illegal, or if unprevented, is illegal in the United States, in many modern societies that are really that present a very difficult scenario to test all of our drugs, therapies. So I believe that in cisplatin and antibiotic-induced hearing loss are probably the lowest hanging fruits for us to test. This is why I believe this is not only bigger medical needs, bigger market, but also a lowest hanging fruit for us to have significant impact to the society and to individuals.
Right.
So I hope this will hope to reach that goal by further characterizing our TT001 and 2 drugs. So those are the ones that are really important. We hope to further develop collaborations with oncologists who are interested in treating preventing their cancer patients with the potential cisplatin-induced hearing loss. So in the amyloid glycoside-induced hearing loss populations, we hope to work with cystic fibrosis community and the doctors who will have more interest as well as the expertise to collaborate with us to carry out some of the clinical trials in the future.
Yeah, that's excellent information. I think many of our viewers see patients in their clinic on a routine basis that have noise-induced hearing loss, given the prevalence of that condition in audiology clinics around the country, around the world for that matter. I was wondering if you could kind of give us your perspective on how one of your otoprotective agents could work theoretically, maybe hypothetically, in a clinic as far as preventing noise-induced hearing loss or minimizing the effects of it.
Yeah, so this is a really big challenge. The noise-induced hearing loss is very prevalent, as you notice, right? And it's particularly prevalent in the military settings. For example, our military service members, many of them, have experienced noise-induced hearing loss. So they must have an incentive to participate in those studies. The complexity of this noise-induced hearing loss is that it is very difficult to control the noise environment. And in fact, as I mentioned in my previous statements, that the many situations where the noise-induced hearing loss, if not prevented, not treated, is illegal. So therefore, you have to treat the population with noise-induced hearing loss ethically. So for that major problem is very difficult to tackle. So what we hope is in the future, somehow we have collected enough evidence that our otoprotective agents would be useful for cisplatin and amyloid glycoside-induced hearing loss. So then we will have gathered enough momentum to start tackling some of those problems of noise-induced hearing loss. So, for example, it has been widely studied to test, many drugs have been tested in the noise-induced hearing loss clinical trials. There were about 30 or so in the United States, registered in the United States. So we have, however, none of them have succeeded so far as I know. So it's been very challenging. There are multiple other issues. For example, the complexity of the genetic backgrounds, genetic contributions, predispositions that could contribute to the various responses of noise-induced hearing loss. And also the history of the noise exposure would also contribute significantly to the variation in the clinical settings, and plus all of the other legal, ethical issues. So it's been very difficult to test. And more important, I think, what we hope is that the better drugs may provide a better chance to prevent such conditions, right? So we actually had started by screening better drugs. We actually compared our drugs with many other benchmark compounds under identical conditions, such as cochlear explants, against cisplatin-induced hair cell loss in the explant conditions. And we found our potency is much better. So our hope is that we don't have to use some of the low potent drugs. We should stick to good potent drugs first. And it is also very difficult to get good drugs to be in the market. It's almost impossible to get a bad drug to be good in the market. So we hope that we should establish a good potent drug first in other conditions, and then we hope to apply in the future to noise-induced hearing loss or even to the age-related hearing loss. Those are the two most difficult difficult conditions to tackle therapeutically. History, as I mentioned, multiple problems there.
And it sounds like an incredibly complex challenge, a lot of different components to it. Looking on into the horizon, what are some of the future plans that you have at Ting Therapeutics?
Yeah, as I outlined in the beginning, our vision is to really start providing some proof of concept, preclinical drug candidates, and then hope that we can get IND approval by FDA and apply to the clinical studies. So eventually we will be able to get NDA and FDA approval for commercialization in the future. So that's our long-term plan. And to achieve such a goal, our major focus right now is to focus on cisplatin-induced hearing loss as well as amigdaloglycine-induced hearing loss. And those are the two trackable and easiest and lowest hanging fruit for us. So I believe our first goal is to accomplish those studies and to get IND approval. And the next step will be to collaborate with the clinicians with the help of either federal government grants from NIDCD or from private investors who will sponsor such an expensive, large number of patient trials. So I think those are the most difficult step. And we hope in 5 or 6 years, we will have some drugs for both cisplatin-induced hearing loss for adult and many other types of tumors without much of the side effects, and safe and potent and efficacious. And hopefully we should also provide the first drugs that would be in the amigdaloglycine-induced hearing loss space. And of course, our company is aware of many other companies that also are doing very similar studies with their strong drug candidates. And we are very much want to collaborate with different companies to cover different areas of those unmet medical needs. And we believe all our companies should work together, and to work together with the government agency as well as the venture capital, private investing companies to support our effort. What I believe, and we also believe that, again, this induced hearing loss is a very important, lowest hanging fruit, a feasible market to tackle. And it will have significant payback. This, I think, is a very attractive market. You can compare to many other inner-ear therapeutic space or research areas. I believe, based on my experience of 25 years of research in the hearing loss space, I think those two are the biggest market with the lowest hanging fruit and will have biggest payoff. So this is what I think our field should all sort of put more emphasis on this induced hearing loss space.
It's good to
That's
know.
my sort of the message I want to
I
lay
kind
out.
of have a general question about the broader topic of otoprotective agents. I think I'm asking this on the behalf of a lot of the clinicians that watch this for, getting information from researchers such as yourself. How should clinicians think about otoprotective agents, and how might that impact their clinical practice down the road?
Yeah, so our goal obviously is to co-treat our drug with chemotherapy and amyloidosis at the same time. So what we hope is that our drug would not only provide therapeutic effects for it, but also we would combine with some other additional methods. We will identify the risk of those people those patients who will develop hearing loss associated with those treatments, such as chemo treatment as well as methotrexate treatment, right? So we believe we should do two different areas, two different approaches. One is to test the effective drugs, and the second is to probably determine those individuals who are at high risk. So if we can develop genetic testing or some other biomarker testing to identify those individuals at risk and further treat those individuals together with our therapeutics. So those are the two areas that clinicians could help us to identify those kinds of individuals and tailor the therapeutic approaches for the benefits of the patients. And those are the two areas. Of course, in the noise as well as the age-related hearing loss, those are much far down the road, much bigger market, and they will have different challenges for clinicians to tackle those kind of bigger diseases.
Right, right. That's excellent information. I appreciate your time on this. One last question: where can people get more information about Ting Therapeutics?
Yeah, so we have, as you found in our website, was teamtherapeutics.com. And so we have outlined our vision, our current top compounds, top drugs, as well as our recent publications and some of the grant information. So you could contact us if you have some interest in carrying out some of the clinical studies or have some interest in investing into our company for our, this ambitious approaches.
Great. We will, if you're okay with it, we will put your email in the show notes.
Sure. As I said, I always said I got 99 problems, hearing loss on one. Yeah. So hopefully that will be the message.
Well, we'll make that happen for you.
Yeah. Thanks to Jay-Z.
Yeah, Jay-Z, thank you. Co-founder, CEO of Ting Therapeutics. Thanks for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate it.